Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to live a more awake, alive, and brilliant life, then do we have the Wake Up Show for you. Today I'll be talking with Chris Barez-Brown, renowned speaker, Fortune 500 consultant, and the author of one of the highest vibration books I've ever had the pleasure of pawing, let alone reading, Wake Up. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about brilliant and playful strategies to help snap you out of autopilot to live in the here and now. That, plus we'll talk about Elvis and Bono, Carrie and Lowell, solo trips to Mexico, how not to choose to have children, what in the world's guerrilla gardening, the importance of cider, the power of shucky shucks. Gotcha. And what in the world statistical weightings has to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Chris. Are you ready to shine?
I most certainly am. It's great to be with you, Michael. I'm loving your energy today.
Thank you so much. I'm looking at my microphone. My energy seems to be off the charts. I seem to be pinging today. So thank you so much for being here, and a mighty woohoo!
Woo back at ya.
Awesome. So before we dive into things, were you always creative growing up?
Good question. Well, I think children naturally are creative. I mean, what they can do with a cardboard box is extraordinary, and I was no exception. I guess I did have a slightly different way of looking at the world. And my parents would say sometimes that was a little testing, but I saw that as certainly as creativity. So I'd say yes. I'd say I definitely had curiosity playing with me, and I always wanted to experiment and try new things out. So it was a part of me, yeah.
Excellent. And then I understand in your later years growing up, you started getting into math and statistical analysis and math.
And more math.
And math.
Yeah, absolutely. My studies at the age of 16, 17 were basically math all over. I was a very logical, analytical guy. I didn't really understand why it seemed to work for me. Later in life, I realized that actually if you love math to the depth that I did, a lot of it's to do with kinesthetics, and it's actually to do with following emotions. But at the time, it felt like it was all logic to me.
Oh, I've got to ask. Math, kinesthetics, following emotions. Tell me more about this.
Yeah, so basically when you start learning math, it's very much about kind of logic, analysis, rationality, and it's very much about kind of conscious thinking. But actually, when you get to higher levels of it, I've read lots of research that suggests that actually you feel your way through it, and it's a lot more about intuition. It's a lot more about gut response. And actually, although after you have solved equations, for example, you can often logically explain why. Whilst you're doing it, you can't, because actually a lot of it is subconscious processing. So that kind of makes a bit more sense as to why I loved it.
Awesome. And that also makes sense where I've heard of the most brilliant mathematicians. They'll often put their problems into their head at night and wake up in the morning or go for a walk or brush their teeth, and then the answers come to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's go from gut response and intuition to how in the world did you end up in the Army?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's through necessity, to be honest. So I grew up in a small rural town, and the education from 16 on wasn't quite as good as up to 16. And therefore I looked around and I thought, maybe I should try and get a scholarship to somewhere. We didn't have a lot of money. And I applied for numerous scholarships. I was fortunate at the time. I was a good student, so I got them all. And the best one was the one from the Army, where they basically pay for my next 5 years education, amazing facilities, great teachers. And I thought, why not? And I was an outdoor kind of kid. I love my sports. So it just seemed like a natural fit.
So you went into the Army. How were you as a fit in the Army?
I would say, again, a little bit testing, Michael, truth be told. So I understood I had to fit in. I understand I used to have to follow a kind of command and control structure, because that's all part of the Army. But I would use any creativity I could to flout the rules around the edges. So I used to have obviously short hair on the back, but very long hair under my beret. That was okay. It wasn't on show. I used to break as many rules as I possibly could. But, I learned a lot. I learned a lot when I was in the Army. Shall I tell you a story about it?
Please do.
So I remember one thing that I had to do. So I went to Sandhurst, which is the equivalent to West Point, and it's officer training. And every morning you had to get woken up at like 5 a.m. You'd strip your bed, you'd take all the sheets off, the pillowcases, the blankets, and you had to build something called a bed block. Now, a bed block was like a piece of layered cake, right? So you'd have a sheet here, you'd have a blanket there, a pillowcase there, and then you'd wrap a blanket around it. And it had to have 90-degree corners, absolutely perfect every time. And then you'd put it on the end of your bed and you'd be inspected. And basically you passed the inspection or you didn't, and it happened every day. And it just struck me as a pointless exercise, because once you'd made it, you then break it apart again, make your bed for that evening, and then you do it all over again. So I decided I was going to make the best bed block you have ever seen in your life. And I used cardboard inside to reinforce it. I had safety pins within it to make sure it was all taut. It was indestructible. It was perfect. And then what I did was I just slept in my sleeping bag, which seemed like a pretty neat kind of creative solution. Anyway, the first day I put it on my bed, I was thinking, I am going to get an Oscar for this. This is going to be the best bed block ever made. The sergeant came in, didn't bat an eyelid, didn't say well done, just passed by, which is good news. Second day, passed by again, passed inspection. The third day, he screamed at me, picked it up, threw it out of the window where I was praying he wasn't watching, because it landed perfectly, in the same form as it was thrown. I then went outside, picked it up, brought it in, dusted it down, put it back on my bed. The next day, I passed inspection. And it just kind of struck me that, we can spend all our life trying to control the world, and there is nothing you can do about it, right? So I had exactly the same bed block every day. Some days it passed, some days it failed. The one thing that I could control was how I show up. If I get my energy right, I've done my bit, and then just let's see what the world thinks. And it was a great lesson. It's a great lesson. It's one that, I've been applying to my work ever since.
Beautiful. And we're going to dive into that quite a bit. But first, we'll cool. segue from there. You did your stint in your army. You came out, you got a job, and then you quit at 27.
Yeah, I did, yeah. So I had a fantastic job. I was running the biggest beer brand in Europe, and everything was going fantastically. I should have been delighted. We won Brand of the Year. I had a huge budget. We were making adverts all around the world. I was on the fast track program, and yet there was something inside of me that was just going, you know what? I don't want to do this. I've got no idea what I want to do, but I know it's not this. And I just had this kind of itch. So I ended up throwing it all in, and I went traveling, and I read everything I could on innovation, on creativity, on personal development, because I wanted to come up with some inspiring possibility for me. And actually, that's the moment that I fell in love with the work that I do today, because I think we've all got that struggle. We all have moments we go, I've got no idea how to tap into my passions to make sure that every day counts, to make sure that every day is extraordinary. And that's the stuff I love to do. It's much more fun than innovating around brands.
Woohoo! So you came back. How'd you get started again? And then how'd you come up with upping your Elvis?
Well, I came back and I started my own marketing agency for a bit, which I was rubbish at. I had no idea what I was doing. I did great work, but I had to build a pittance because I had no idea of a consultancy model. But I was also teaching Reiki at the time, and I kind of got into that. I love the more esoteric aspects and the energetic aspects, and I started to explore creativity in business with, I guess, what my friends would call the slightly more hippie sides of me. So I did a bit of shamanism, some psychotherapy, hypnotherapy. I just tried all sorts of things out, and I found that ultimately, if you wanted companies to innovate better, it was nothing to do with process and tools and techniques and structures and all that clever stuff. It was all to do with how people showed up. So I started to focus a lot more on that. And I set up Upping Your Elvis with the vision of helping people become more confident, more flexible, more energized, and obviously more creative, so that actually they could be the input for amazing businesses, and they could look after all that great brand stuff. But let's get them right first and worry about the business later.
I love it. And what I really love in particular, not just that you mentioned the word Reiki in this interview, but is that it's really about getting them out of their heads. If they want to succeed in business or in life, we got to drop from here to here. This is where the best decisions are made.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, most of my clients are fantastic thinkers. I could leave them in rooms for days with lots of data, and they would debate it ad nauseum. But the transferal from thinking to feeling is where the challenge often is. And if you ask people, if you say, look, if you think about the biggest decisions you've made in life, what proportion was feeling versus thinking? For getting married, having kids, buying houses, stuff like that. People will very quickly say, 80-20, it was all a feeling thing. If you ask them the same question in business, it reverses straight away, because everyone's all about analysis and making sure that they're making good decisions, and they need to make sure there's a great insight and proposition behind it. And the problem with it is we think too much, and therefore we often stifle that creativity. So I'm a huge advocate of feeling more, especially early on in the process, and then applying a bit more of the logic later.
I like that. The logic will help you cross the road safely.
Exactly.
So we talk about those big decisions in life. I've got to ask you the story about your kids. But if we jump back before that, did you choose your wife based on a statistical analysis?
That was pure heart. Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing. So I went to Mexico, and I found myself bizarrely on holiday on my own for a few days on a naked yoga retreat. Now that's
awesome.
It's not pretty in many ways, but it was a really good retreat. And I did a little exercise where I decided it was time to get my life in order. And I did this exercise where I wrote down all the things on one side of the sheet that I loved about myself. And then I wrote all the things that I hated about myself on the other one. And I spent about a week learning to love and accept the things that I hated. And, it was the biggest transformation. It's as if my whole energy system changed. And, I got off the plane the next day and I met my wife. And I'm certain if I hadn't done that, she'd have completely ignored me. But there was a different vibration. So that's how I found my wife. That's purely energetic. Yeah.
I know, Ty. I met my wife when I was meditating at a Buddhist meditation center. Had I not spent, for you, it was a week. For me, it was several years, basically reclusive, off by myself, working on myself.
Sure.
There is a 0% chance we would have matched or been together. Not a chance.
Yeah.
So if we go from there, you've got your energy more in order, but it sounds like when the decision came to having kids, it got interesting.
It did get interesting because guess what? Logic came to play again. So that whole math background, that whole kind of pros and cons, let's analyze this decision-making process, pop back out. And it's ridiculous. But for months, myself and my wife literally did pros and cons on having a family. And of course, for every pro, there's a con. It's a purely emotional decision. So trying to do it logically is ridiculous. So what we did is we decided to make it real. And obviously, borrowing a baby doesn't work because that's not real enough. As a lot of my friends do, getting a puppy is not quite the same as having a child, so that doesn't work. So actually, what we did is we did something quite counterintuitive. We actually decided not to have children, and we visualized it and locked it in and lived with it. And it was fascinating because for the first 2 days or so, I was actually excited, which really surprised me. So I was thinking about loft apartments and sports cars, exotic holidays, Burning Man, all of this stuff was looking great. And then after a couple of days, I started to think, well, who will my friends be? And what will retirement look like? And what the holidays look like in the family? And then I found myself, I was living in West London at the time. I was walking around parks on the Thursday, looking longingly at fathers with small children. And until the police arrived, it was a bit awkward. And I realized that after the end of the week, we'd spent this kind of time feeling relatively miserable. So we changed our minds. We then said, right, let's visualize having a family. And we compared the difference in how we felt. And it was like night and day. We'd had a pretty miserable week. As soon as we changed our minds, we felt fantastic. It was obvious we wanted to have a family. I'm delighted to say we got 2 smashing kids. But I love the fact that what we did is we really practiced what we preach. We've actually taken a creative technique, which is make something real, listen to your visceral response, and that will give you better information than any logic that you can have. And in our case, obviously, it's been a bit of a game changer, but I've used that principle in everyday life ever since.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Before we move on, I shared this story with my wife. She's the producer, and she wanted to know. I said, you did visualization and NLP. She's like, what do you do on NLP? So I've got to ask.
Oh, it's all to do with modalities and how you lock things in. So it's basically making the visualization just stronger. is what it was. Yeah.
Fantastic. So let's go from there. I want to talk about your beautiful book. But before I do that, this is, when I say a beautiful book that is made like a diary. It's got this strap that goes over it. It's tactile. It's colorful. The page stock is super thick. I know what trouble I went through with a publisher many years ago to get purple in my book. You have all different colors in your book. Where did both the creative genius, how did you come up with the idea to make something that is so, I can't think of another word, gropable and filled with amazing energy?
Well, I write about a principle in the book called Spielzeug.
Yes.
And Spielzeug is a very simple principle, which is, we all have favorite things. Like I've got a load of guitars in here. I have one, which is my favorite. And when I pick it up, it feels different. It has a different energy. Some people will say the same about clothes or about their favorite coffee mug. It has a different energy. And I think that the more we can tune up to the things that have an energy that fit us and give us something back, the better our lives tend to be, and the more awake and more conscious we can be. So because that's a principle I live with, I didn't want to have a book that didn't feel great. It would be a bit ironic, right? If you picked it up and went, don't want it. So we spent a lot of time looking at the visuals, at the paperweight, at how we could make the cover sing to the right people. And I say to the right people because the whole energy of the book is a very particular vibration, as you know. And I wanted to make sure that it called out to the people that was looking for that vibration. And I think you can do that in the way the book is designed. And I hope it does. It sounds like it has for you, Michael.
You were talking, and I'll get that term Spielzeug, I'm probably not pronouncing it quite right, but you were talking in your book about different things that attract you by their energy. And I've got this book in my hands, and I'm like, this is one of them.
Exactly.
And
in which case, that's great. That's what we were going for.
You succeeded tremendously. So diving into the book then, what does it mean to have an autopilot life?
So autopilot in itself is not a massive issue. Mm-hmm. It's the proportion of your life that you spend in it. So just to explain what autopilot life is, we've all had the experience of driving a long distance in a car, arriving at the destination and not remembering large chunks of the journey, right? And that's because we've been driving on autopilot. And the reason it happens is very simple. Our conscious brain is really thirsty. In fact, it's like a V8 gas guzzling machine, right? So it's great for logic and analysis, but when we use that, we tire quite quickly. And we know that because if we've ever learned a new language or an instrument, then you can feel it very fast. So the way we save energy is we switch to autopilot by using our subconscious. Now, our subconscious is more like a Tesla. It's incredibly fuel efficient. And the way that it saves fuel is it looks at what it's doing today and says, have I seen something like this before? If I have, I'm going to assume it's exactly the same, and therefore I'm going to behave in exactly the same way. So I don't have to think from first principles. I can think from habit and routine. So brilliant for driving, saves us loads of energy. But it doesn't just happen when we drive. It happens when we do anything habitual. So it happens when we're at work, when we're in meetings, sitting at our desk, when we're with our loved ones, quite frankly, when we're living our lives. So we did some research for the book, and it suggests that most of us spend around 80% of our life on autopilot. Now, brilliant for being efficient. Difficulty is today is not like yesterday, all right? And if we assume it's always the same on autopilot, we miss out on the fantastic opportunities that are here. So what this book is all about is helping us wake up, become more conscious, even if it's just once a day, so we can step back and say, what's needed here? What's needed here today in this unique situation where I can bring my unique skills and talents to play so I lead a more extraordinary life? And that's what it's all about.
Woohoo! From there, what did you learn and how did he inspire you from David Bowie's passing?
Oh, gosh, yeah. So, I mean, I'm a big Bowie fan. There's a lot of us out there. I mean, I thought he was just extraordinary. And he's one of those people that always seemed to be in my life, at particular moments. And although, I didn't see as much of him in his last 10 years, he was still there. There's still music. There were still things happening. And the day that I heard that he died, it was one of those very sad moments, but it made me feel incredibly alive. And a lot of people report this. A lot of people say, when relatives pass away, that although it's sad, you actually become incredibly conscious in that moment because it makes you kind of reappraise things. And, I looked at the age that he died and I went, wow, if I'm like him, I've probably got 20 years left. And therefore, if I'm still writing books at the rate that I'm doing, I've probably only got about another 5 in me. Wow, they better count. You start to think differently, right? And it was kind of ironic that through his death, I felt more alive. Sad, but alive.
I'd say beautiful, but not, but beautiful.
Yeah, it's true.
One of the exercises you have us do in the book is doodling. And I found that incredibly powerful of a tool. Why do you have us doodling and drawing and even writing in the book?
Well, so we process, a lot kinesthetically. And I think if you just read a book passively, then you are going to take in the information. But for a lot of us, we need to be more active. And I'm a doodler. I like to sketch things. And I love the idea that the book becomes yours. It's your journal. It has a life of its own. And if you doodle in it, it becomes unique, right? It's like no other book out there on the planet. And as people kind of read stuff, I hope they engage in it in such a way they bring it to life. They make their notes in it, so it's very much theirs. And I was brought up, it's in my schooling. If you made a note in a book, it was terrible. I mean, it was punishable, and it seems quite laughable to me now. I understand why they did it, but I want us to have a more groovy time and have some fun with it. And education, learning, growth, and development. If you have fun, it's so much easier to connect the dots. So that was the purpose.
Absolutely. And I can remember senior year high school, I had a very boring teacher for English class. And so I had a whole notebook that I would doodle and draw, try to make these Escher-esque kind of geometric designs, fun stuff. And that actually allowed me to process information better. That actually, I think, took it in deeper into my conscious or maybe even my subconscious through the doodling process.
Yeah. Agreed.
So let's go from there. Let's talk about the fastest possible way to get off of autopilot.
The quickest way, deep breath. There we go. You're on it, Michael. Yeah. So I find it fascinating breathing. So I run workshops in my house here in Lyme Regis on the coast. I'm looking out at the sea now, and we take people away from their busy working environments. And we have, 5 days here going quite deep into who they are, how they show up, the energy they create. And the number of times I have boards here from big multinationals. And at the end of the course, I say, guys, I just want to hear what your big learning is. The number of times people say, breathing. It's extraordinary. And I know I shouldn't be surprised by that, but it still smacks me every time because it's kind of like, wow. It is one of the most basic things. We do it naturally without thinking about it. But most of us do it so badly. In fact, I was one of the biggest culprits. So I have a wonderful coach. I've been working with him for almost 15 years. And the first 6 months of working together was just on breathing.
Wow.
And since then, it's made such a difference to my whole energetic system. So the fastest way for us to get out of autopilot is just to nail some good breaths. And what I've been doing a lot with my clients recently is just doing this 4-5-6 breath, which is very, very simple. And all you do is you breathe in through your nose for 4, you hold it for 5, and you breathe out through your mouth for 6. And by doing so, your whole energetic system changes. You slow your brain down, you get more conscious, more focused, you become more present, and therefore you wake up. And by doing so, in a matter of seconds, less than a minute, you can get a much clearer perception of where you're at.
Beautiful. How often would you have a client do this throughout the day, at least initially?
So I'm a fan of making it a relatively regular thing because it's a bit like muscle memory. If you start to do it relatively regularly through the day, it starts to become unconscious. And obviously we breathe unconsciously already. So if we can get good breathing to be unconscious, chances are it's going to stick. The difficulty with autopilot, this is the irony, is when you're in autopilot, it's hard to snap out of it because autopilot's in control, right? So what you have to do is you have to find ways to kind of break the system.
Mhm.
So you've got to be conscious about your breathing for a while until it becomes unconscious. So I'm a big fan. When I started to do this work, I had a little, I think they called it the motivator, and it was a little machine you put in your pocket. You set it. I'd set it for 20 minutes,
Mhm.
and every 20 minutes it would vibrate, and I would nail a breath, and I just go, and I did that every 20 minutes. And after a week of doing that, I didn't need it anymore. So you can set your phone. There are apps you can get for this. I think a little 20-minute reminder just to get that breath in, it makes a huge difference to your day.
I like that. I like the repetition. I like being able to link it to something. In fact, an idea you have later in the book is to buff out, which is, and I guess it wasn't yours originally, but
No.
every time you go to the bathroom,
Yeah.
tell us about it.
Well, it's an amazing. So, I've been struggling with this kind of how do you get off of autopilot? How do you lead this more extraordinary life? And I was at a friend of mine's wedding. He's got a business called Finisterre, which is a cold water surf company.
Mhm.
And we were out on the headlands, toasting with champagne, having a great time. And I was talking to Ernie, who used to run the marketing there. And Ernie's one of these guys. He is amazing. He has a sparkle. He has an energy. He has a fizz. And I was feeling inquisitive. And I was just like, look, Ernie, what is it about you that gives you this energy? Because you're, in the nicest possible way, you're not normal, Ernie. You're quite special. Anyway, he had a bit of a laugh about it. And he said, well, there's nothing particularly, interesting about what I do. I said, come on. He said, okay, I've got one thing I do, but it's weird. All right. And I'm like going, oh, I do weird. Bring that on. And he said, well, every time I go to the bathroom, I do 20 press-ups. And I'm like, okay, that is a little bit weird, Ernie. I'm with you on that. And he was very keen to point out, not in the bathroom. It was the time that was important, not the place. But I was like, okay, so tell me, why does that work? And he said, well, number one, I never go to a gym. And if you see him, he's buff. I mean, he's a ripped guy. So that's number one. But number two, he knows that every hour or so, he has that little spike in consciousness where he gets the blood flowing around his body. He gets a clearer perception. He starts to become more focused on the here and the now. And therefore, he makes better decisions about what he does. And he doesn't get swept along with that tide of busyness that so many of us do. Most of my clients, they run big organizations and they wake up in the morning and the first thing they do is they look at their email, right? And the next time they are conscious, they're back in bed and the day has gone. Now, Ernie doesn't have that problem because Ernie knows every hour he goes for his little bathroom buff up, he gets focused, he gets conscious, he wakes up.
Awesome. Woohoo!
Yeah.
The people who do wake up, check email, go to work, autopilot, come back, some of them put down the phone and then go for the remote.
Yeah. That's the next one.
What's the challenge and what is so bad about it?
Yeah, so television, it's not bad per se. It's with technology, there's nothing wrong with the phone. It's just the way we use it, right? And it's the same with television. We all need to be entertained. We all need to be informed. We all need to learn stuff, and TV is great for that. The problem with it is when it starts to dominate your life. Now, in the UK, we watch on average 4 hours of TV a day. In America, it's 5 hours a day. Now, we've only got 24. That's a huge chunk of life going on there. And it would be fine, I think, if we had small pockets of it and it was all about us doing something deliberate. So I've had a hard day. I need an hour's relaxing. Great, done it, gone. I want to learn something about, the planet and nature. Great, I'll watch a documentary. Done, gone. Well, what tends to happen is we come in exhausted and we just go, whoop, autopilot. And TV is the fastest way to get autopilot to kick in. So breathing gets you off it. TV gets you in it. And we just sit there passively, just soaking stuff up. And for me, if you overindulge, it's just a bit of a terrible waste of life. I read a wonderful quote. I can't remember the guy, but, let's not watch TV. Let's make TV. And I like the idea of our lives should be better than the TV programs we watch. And I couldn't agree more.
I like that very, very much. And I found that even if you're conscious about the programming, because it's flashing lights, it's flickering right in front of your eyes.
Yeah.
What's in between the programming goes straight in, and that's often not what we want to ingest.
I mean, TV does influence, the way that we shop, the way that we live our lives, the way that we think about politics. All of those things get shaped, and we might not feel it that consciously, but it does have an effect. So, yeah, I limit. I mean, I watch very little TV, just because number one, I have a very active life, and number two, I just want to use my time a bit more productively.
Awesome. So from there, let's talk about ingestion real briefly. And do lab rats really prefer sugar to cocaine?
Apparently so. So the research says, yeah, it's and it has very very much a similar impact on our brains. Funnily enough.
So if we want to get awake, then you talk about something about doing a 4-day ban. What's that look like?
Yeah. So what tends to happen with our diet is things creep in over time, and again, it's not that conscious, but autopilot. If you think about it, autopilot is dominated by our subconscious. Now, our subconscious and our processing in our brain hasn't developed a great deal over the last 50,000 years. So
Yeah.
a lot of it is really designed to be a cave person. Now, cave people, number one on priority is survival, right? So we tend to react to change and to danger in a very visceral way, but also survival is all about making sure that we keep our system going. So when we're on autopilot, we make some pretty bad decisions on what we ingest. So sugar is a typical craving when we're not conscious, because it's just pure fuel. It's just a way of keeping us going. And I think the average consumption of refined sugar now is something like 22 teaspoons a day. That's hidden. That's hidden in our food. That's not stuff that we add ourselves. That's just hidden because we love it. Because back in the 70s, we all decided fat was terrible. So we took fat out of our diet. And obviously, if you take fat out, everything tastes like cardboard. So guess what? We put sugar back in. And obviously, sugar has all sorts of issues around diabetes, but also massive issues on the way that our bodies work. So it tends to jack us up. It tends to, give us these highs and then terrible lows again afterwards. And actually, it's another great trap for autopilot. So getting rid of sugar makes a huge difference. Now, you will never get rid of it totally, and we do need some of it. But being deliberate about how much you have in your diet makes a big difference.
Beautiful. Let's go from there. Let's talk about being deliberate. Let's talk about both slow walking and crossing the River Thames with the eyes of a child.
Yeah. So, again, it was a great lesson to me. Some years ago, was working on a project for a client, and we decided to go out and get stimulated. And we often used to do stuff in the past. We used to get in taxis and just ride around having ideas, looking at stuff, or we used to go on trains and do stuff. But in this particular case, we went to Blackfriars Bridge in London and decided to walk over the bridge with the eyes of a child. So we were going to look at everything from first principles. We're going to be fascinated. We're going to be curious. And it was a really interesting experience because I would usually cross that bridge in a matter of minutes walking, and I wouldn't take in any information. It took me at least an hour and a half in that particular journey, and everything was fascinating. And it's purely because we slowed right down. We started to see things we wouldn't usually see. And therefore, everything became stimulus. We had some great ideas. We had some fantastic breakthroughs. But it really struck me that pace is one of the things that we can manipulate to change our consciousness. Mm-hmm. And if you think that most of us are dashing from A to B constantly, we're always thinking about what's next rather than what's in front of us. When we slow down, we can connect in ways that are completely different. And therefore, by doing that deliberately, you will, I think, wake up and you'll break out of that autopilot mode.
Beautiful. Let's go from there to something that I did for several years until I met my wife. Then she burned all my clothes and had me start again. But at the time, it seemed like a brilliant idea. I had multiple sets of identical running gear for short conditions and for long conditions. And that's all I wore was the same thing day in, day out. It made my life, to me, as a bachelor, much easier.
Yeah, well, again, it's quite a popular thing, isn't it, at the moment? Obama did it quite famously. Steve Jobs did it quite famously. And, the principle here is that if you wear the same clothes all the time, you actually have more bandwidth for the big decisions. And there's a simplification that goes on because apparently we're all suffering from decision fatigue, which you kind of get, right? So a lot of the challenges in this book, they're not claiming to be, big life-changing ones. But if you actually do them all regularly and you work your way through them, then they all have a cumulative effect. So one of the simple challenges there is for a week, just work out your wardrobe, wear the same thing every day, obviously in managing hygiene. So make sure you got the same versions in the same color, and just see what happens. And it's interesting. I've experimented with it. And at times I've actually found it incredibly simple. I found it quite liberating. It certainly got me into a slightly different place. I actually felt a little more sure about who I was quite a lot of the time. And sometimes I continued it for prolonged periods. And sometimes I absolutely fought against it. It's interesting. And I suddenly went, I started to wear quite garish stuff and really dress, a lot more for the moment. Either way, I became more conscious. So it does something.
I love that. And that second one gets me thinking to something that I do on occasion and I challenge my clients with, which is occasionally dressing completely like somebody or something else to shake everything up.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I mean, I think, taking on other people's identities is a fun experiment. Now, you don't have to stay like it forever. It's just a game, right? But it will shift your perspective.
Beautiful. So let's go from there. Let's talk about drawing our life. What does this look like? Why is it so powerful?
So it's an exercise I've done with nearly all of my teams over the last 10, 15 years. When we all get together, we've been working all over the world, doing lots of different stuff, and it's quite hard for us to connect with each other, understand the context of where we're at in a short period of time. Mm-hmm. So we started to do this as a way of just getting everyone together, but then we realized there was something quite therapeutic about it, quite, again, perspective shifting. So all you do is you just take a big sheet of paper, you just spend 5 minutes with some colored pens, drawing the last year. Yeah, just whatever went on. And it can be, you don't have to be a great artist. I mean, they can be symbols, they can be anything at all, but you kind of capture what you think were the big things that went on for you. And then you just shift gears, you take another piece of paper and you draw what you hope the next year will be. Now, that's a useful thing and it's a re-expression, it's a creativity tool, but the power of it then comes from explaining your picture to your friend. So you grab your buddy and you talk them through everything. And it's interesting because what you drew might not be necessarily what you say because you've processed a bit further. And what we tend to find is it's just a very quick way to put a stake in the sand and say, hey, this is where I've been and this is where I'd like to go. And therefore, this is what's important to me right now. And so infrequently do we find that we actually take stock. And it's just a very simple exercise to do that.
Awesome. Another way that we can take stock is going out to forest, being around trees. Can you tell us the importance of trees in your life?
Yeah, well, it's a really interesting time to be talking about it. I'm looking out here right now and I have a favorite tree. It's a turkey oak, and it's amazing. We have parties under it. You can get 100 people under it. It's got this incredible stretch. And unfortunately, Stormophilia that was here 2 weeks ago took half of it down. So yeah, the significance of trees is particularly palpable right now. We still have half of it. It's all good, but it's been quite an emotional time. But for me, trees have an incredible energy, and I'm really lucky. I've got woodland around me. I can always see trees out here and be out amongst them. And I find they're fantastic for me grounding my energy and for me just shifting through this very busy, technical, digital kind of world in which we live and just actually getting back into something that's maybe slightly more fundamental. And the Japanese have been doing this for centuries where they call it forest bathing. And actually, if you're ill and you go to your doctor in Japan, they will write you a prescription to go forest bathing because they know the impact of it on you, not only your kind of your physicality, but your whole emotional, spiritual energy as well. So going off into the woodland and spending some time there with, our tree friends is just great for us.
Woohoo! So let's go from there to another couple fun ones. The importance of dance, and I can't believe I'm going to go try this. Your son Harvey's writing, your son Harvey's writing, your son Harvey's writing songs.
That's very good.
Oh, God. Thank you.
Love it. Well, where do you want to start? Writing songs?
Sure.
So the writing songs thing, it's a really interesting thing insight that I had when I was challenged. So I play guitar a little bit, and I wanted to learn how to get better. Which as musicians, you're always trying to go for a new style. And I found this local teacher who's Irish, he's a fantastic guy. And he said, why do you want to learn? And I'm like, well, I suppose I just love music. I love what it does to me. And he said, do you want your words to soar into the clouds? Do you want your voice to dance with the music as you do it? And it was the most poetic guy, the way he talked about it. And eventually I just had to go, yeah, I want everything you said. He said, great, write me 3 songs for next week. And I remember going, oh, I can't do that. I'd never written a song properly. I'd never done it. And I found the whole creative process really interesting because there was a lot of mind talk to overcome. There was a lot of stuff going on in my head. But when I got through it and I started to just play and try stuff out, I found it amazingly liberating. And then there's another stage, which is you then perform it to somebody. And again, mind talk. And actually, once you get through it, you feel free. You feel as if you can just let go and let rip. So I found writing songs quite profound for me. Interestingly, I speak in front of thousands of people regularly. Singing a song to one person, I was more nervous. Isn't that fascinating? So therefore, I've been challenging people to do it. And other people have found it quite a visceral experience. So that's why we put it in the book. We said, you know what? There's a song in everyone. You don't have to be an amazing musician. You can just hum a refrain. That's song enough. Have a go at it. You don't have to perform it to somebody, but just enjoy the process. And people have been loving it. So, funnily enough, my son this summer has written over 40 songs that, most of them are on iTunes now. He's 12 years old. And, he's an inspiration to me because he doesn't go, is this good enough? Have I got the right lick in it? He just gets it down. And I think if we do more of that, we create more interesting things. So that's the writing a song thing.
Beautiful. And the next one, the dance piece, I read that in the book. This is not something that's uncommon in my life, but I rushed down the stairs to my wife and immediately broke into dance.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great thing. So dance is this is almost universal, I would say. So we've experimented with all these activities with thousands of people around the world, and the number one activity for people feeling better about themselves, feeling happy, shaking off emotion, connecting to this amazing planet on which we live is dance. And now the latest research is suggesting it's probably the best way of delaying dementia as well. So we've got lots of reasons to dance. So I had some focus groups where I was getting people to try stuff out. They did all sorts of different activities. The one that people carried on doing all the way through was dancing. So it is a strong one. All you got to do, find your favorite tune, jack it up to 11, get a boogie on. Do it on your own, do it in the dark. It doesn't matter. The important thing is you get into your body, you're connecting with the music, and you're having some fun.
Woohoo! Which brings us to another important one. We've been making a lot of, and that we'll be releasing shortly, brain entrainment, binaural music, isochronic tones. There seems to be this amazing power to music to shift our minds, to shift our state of being. Maybe you can tell us about this and Carrie and Lowell.
Yeah. So, Carrie and Lowell from Sufjan Stevens, one of the best tracks, best albums. So I've always loved music. It's always carried me off somewhere new and different, and it's always had such an impact on my emotions, whether it's harnessing happy ones or harnessing slightly deeper, morose ones. Either way, it's great. And I personally believe that being alive is all about emotion, and there's no such thing as a good or a bad one. They're just great. So music takes me more into emotion than anything else, and therefore I know that it does something different to my consciousness. If I'm playing a particular tune and with as high fidelity as you can get, on as decent a system as you can, it will take you somewhere new and different that other things can't. It's got that magical property. And I think back to some of the most profound moments I've had in my life. I would probably say that was live music. When I'm actually experiencing it with other people in that moment. And live music, it's always unique. It'll never happen quite again. And there are moments that I will never forget, going back 20, 30 years, being in gigs and just going, wow, that was special. And actually the Sufjan Stevens, I saw him live a couple of years ago. And, that the way that he performed and the imagery he conjured up, it was just, it was special. So yeah, music, live music, bathe in it, I say.
Woohoo! How do we add an hour to our days?
So this came from a simple insight. A lot of my clients, they complain. They go, I'd love to do this, but I never have enough time, right? I'd love to write poetry, but I don't have enough time. I'd love to get fit, but I don't have enough time. And I was just like, do you know what? You're whining. You're all whining at me. I know. I've got a challenge. Over the next week, wake up 1 hour earlier, all right? Do the thing that you're whining about, okay? And at the end of the week, we can then say, was it that you didn't have enough time for it, or was it not important enough for you, all right? Because, yes, you might be a bit tired over that time, but if that activity fills your soul with so much pleasure and passion for a week, you will find the time to do it from then on in. So either way, you win. So that was the experiment. And it takes a certain commitment to get up an hour earlier. But I think it's a great way of finding out what you really care about and what's important, what's passionate. Create the time. And actually, you know what? If it's something you deeply care about, you can overcome a little bit of tiredness, right?
That makes sense. So from there, on the tired side of things, how do we wake up excited and go to sleep grateful?
So very, very simple thing I've seen families doing around the world. And I've seen them doing it in different ways. But basically, if you boil it all down, when family meals are so important, and a lot of people really mark that occasion by doing something quite neat. So over breakfast, just having a conversation with the family and saying, so, hey, what are we excited about today? And what it does is it primes the pump, it sets an intention, it gets your energy working well. And if you're not with a family, you just jot it down yourself or you talk to your partner about it. But the important thing is you have that focus. Then at the end of the day, it's really good to put a wrap on it. And what we know is gratitude is very good for your whole energetic system. So actually having the conversation at night, again, with yourself or with your family and say, okay, so what's happened today that I'm truly grateful for? Because if we appreciate that, then again, it just gets the system working well. It's a bit more karmic. We start to appreciate stuff around us in our lives that maybe we wouldn't even notice. And I'm a big fan in getting our selective attention to spot the good, because actually there's loads going on, but often we're just going so fast we don't see it. And by taking time to be grateful, I think we'll see it more often.
Awesome. And you're talking here about energetic shifts or state changes. So maybe an important one to talk about is smiling really better than sex?
I've got to say no. I kind of depends on what kind of sex you're having, I guess, Michael. But smiling is, it's a wonderful thing, and it doesn't take any effort. It's something we can all do. It's again universally accepted. It changes our state, and it slows our heart rate. It's good for our processing, so we know it's very good for us. But obviously, it's fantastically good for the planet. If we smile at people, they feel good. One of the big challenges we have at the moment, and I don't need to say this, but it's community, it's connection, it's appreciating the other people we're sharing this planet with. And actually, if we did more of that, a lot of this terrible stuff that's going on wouldn't happen. And now, I'd like to believe a smile will change all of that. It may not, but it'll go a long way towards it.
And another one that is a letter written to someone you care about.
Yeah. Again, a simple insight. I did some work for the British government. I was helping them work with the Nike Foundation, and the head of the department I was working with very kindly took the time to write me a letter, and it was in green ink on a fountain pen. And we don't get letters anymore, right? But they don't seem to happen. So there was something about opening the letter and then obviously reading it and the appreciation in it. But, I was sent that letter, I think 5 years ago. I still have that letter. Now, how many emails have I had in that time that have completely gone in the bin? So it just made me think there is something about writing a letter and reading a letter that just spikes our consciousness. So a simple thing to do is just think of somebody in your life that you really appreciate, but maybe they don't know, maybe you don't spend enough time with, and write them a letter explaining why. And I can guarantee you'll feel good about it as you write it, and you'll become more conscious. But obviously, when they read it, you just give them a real special gift, and they get conscious too, and they feel a bit more love. And we need a bit more love. So it's a simple thing, it's a nice thing, it's old school.
I love it. And when you open your mailbox or somebody brings you your mail and puts it on your desk and there's a personal letter there,
Yeah,
it does feel like a gift.
it does. Very much so.
Awesome. And you got me thinking about an English teacher. I was living in France, had a crazy English teacher, made you write in Oxford English and made you use the fountain pen.
Yeah, nice.
What does it mean to do something big?
So, again, when I was researching the book, I asked lots of people about when they felt most alive. And it was astonishing how many people said, when I did something big. Now, their definition of big varied. It could be they threw their job in. It could be they went traveling. It could be, they got married. But it was a big decision that changed their life substantially. And most of them referred to them as game changers. They said from that moment on, they were different. So for me, moving to the seaside and buying a big place that we can run workshops in was a game changer. Since then, I've been more awake, more conscious, more grateful. So the challenge in the book there was to say, if you were to do something big right now, if there was something that actually, when you look back in 20 years' time, went, wow, that was a game changer, what would it be? What would it be? And even just taking the time to process and think about it is enough to actually change our perception, our consciousness. But then actually acting in it, you kind of know that the vibrations are going to be felt from then on in. So it's good to do some small things. They do ladder up and they make a big difference. But every now and again, pull out something big.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. If I took off my coaching hat right now, I put it on you. I don't want people to just listen to the show and go, oh, that was good, and then forget about it. I want them to have one homework assignment they can begin doing today. What would you give them?
Well, I suppose this pattern interrupt thing I think is fascinating. So, if autopilot's in control, it's going to carry on being in control. So we need to interrupt it. So a really simple thing to do, and you don't get much simpler than this. Take your watch off, put it on your other wrist. If you don't wear a watch, just draw a little flower on your dominant hand. Every time you go to look at your watch and it's not there, or you look at the flower, take that breath. Just go, breathe in for 4, hold it for 5, breathe out for 6. And just ask yourself the question, what's needed here? If you do that just for the next 5 days, I think that could be a game changer for you.
Woohoo! What advice would you give parents to help their kids stay off autopilot?
Well, I think one of the challenges we all have is limiting, screen time. Because it's, if you leave a child with a screen, they will do it all day long. So we have to be responsible. We've got to help them with that. We've got to help them understand that actually that is one world, but there's another one out here. And we have to make this one attractive and exciting. So, let's get them out into nature. Let's get them doing things, do things with them. Passive parenting means that the screen is way more exciting. We've got to be more active. So that's a big thing. And I think then make it a game. I would put a challenge out there and say, right, we're going to take it in turns to pick something for us to do this week that's going to get us off of autopilot. Get the kids to choose, get the parents to follow, make it part of the fun. And I think it's incredibly quickly, it can be part of the culture of the family, So make it enjoyable.
Do you try to put weekend adventures with your family?
Yeah, as much as we can. I mean, I think it's very easy to get stuck in a routine as a family too. So you work hard, you go to school all week, blah, blah, blah. And then everyone just kind of is in recovery mode. And I think, it's fine to have some downtime and to get our energy back. But it's really important to do something exciting and new and different every time. So you got to get out there. And it does take some effort. It does take some planning, but it really pays back. And I think children that grow up knowing that is a good thing to do become very healthy adults.
Woohoo! What personally brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
Well, I'm probably like everyone else. My family are huge for me. My wife, my kids, my dogs. Nature is massive. But for me, learning is just fascinating. So, little story from yesterday. I was sitting here in my office, and I had a call finish a little bit early, and I looked out the window, and it was a beautiful sunny day. It's November, right? in England in November, it's not usually beautiful and sunny and warm. The sea was flat. And I was like, I should get out on the sea. And I suddenly noticed all this dialogue in my head going, well, you can't. You're too busy. You got stuff to do. Nah, 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 nah. It'll be too cold. It's too much work. You won't have long enough. Anyway, I ignored it. And I threw my wetsuit in the car, went down. I was on the water 20 minutes later. I paddled out half a mile.
Yeah.
You know what? We're south facing, right? So I have never seen a sunset in my house. Half a mile off, you see a sunset. The sun went down through the water. It was the most surreal and beautiful thing. I have never felt more alive and more happy. And it was brilliant. But what strikes me is it was so easily not done from all the stuff in my head, all these voices saying you can't do it. So again, another profound learning that even though you do this stuff, you write about it, you do it for a living, we've still got this autopilot kicking in going, no, that's not a habit. That's not a routine. You've got to stay in your office and work harder. And I just love the fact that I'm kicking that into reverse. I'm getting it out of my head and I'm learning how to live a better life. And, long may that continue.
Chills. I've got chills from that one. So where can people go to find out more, to find your beautiful book, to get them out of autopilot? And is rumor correct? You also have an app.
Yeah, we do. Well, very simple insight. Books are great. We love to play with them, but they're not necessarily always with us. And we also learned when we were experimenting with this early on that community helps people learn, right? And keep them committed. So we've launched an app. It's called Wake Up. And you can it gives you lots of things to do. And then you rate it and it learns what you like. So you get an education as to what works best for you. But importantly, you can put up your own activities and people can follow you, you can comment. So there's this whole community feel to it. And people are loving it because you know what? People have got some brilliant ideas out there. There's 54 ideas in the book, but my hope is that soon on the app, there's going to be tens of thousands of things that you can try out and you can find people like you. So, I'm hoping people dig it.
And a website for you.
Oh, for me. So, yeah, you can check me out on Barez-Brown.com or on upping, UPPING, your, YOUR, Elvis.com, which is my business.
Fantastic. So if you didn't catch Barez-Brown.com or uppingyourelvis.com, come on over to InspireNationShow.com and we'll get you over to Barez-Brown.com and uppingyourelvis.com.
Thank you, Michael.
This has been just such a brilliant interview. Any last words of wisdom before maybe you have time for a very short meditation for us?
Yeah, sure. So, I suppose that the last thing that I'd say is that it's amazing how we can get stuck. It's amazing how we can get caught in this busyness trap, get autopilot taking over, and we can miss out on what's going on out there. We can miss out on amazing relationships, amazing people, amazing opportunities. And my encouragement is that every minute of every day, there is something we can tap into if we are awake enough to do so. And all we have to do that is play. We just need to break some habits, try some stuff out, and love doing it. And I've certainly benefited from it. Thousands of people have so far. I just hope the people watching today will give it a go.
Woohoo! Thank you so much. Would you have a brief meditation you wouldn't mind sharing with us?
Okay, sweet. Well, why don't we just begin by closing our eyes?
Unless you're driving the car.
And I think we're going to start with maybe a little bit of that 4, 5, 6 breathing. So if you breathe in through your nose for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold for 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and out through your mouth for 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this time, just follow me. Hold. And out through your mouth. And now just breathe normally, but notice with every breath out, Your muscles get heavier and heavier the more you relax. And as you listen to my voice, calming down the inner conversation, notice how your body feels and how wonderful it is to be you right now. Your unconscious is already beginning to open. So now, as you relax, I would like you to picture in your mind's eye you walking through a summer meadow. The sun is in the sky. You can feel the warmth on your skin. And as you take in a deep breath, notice the fragrances of nature. You are walking barefoot, and you can feel the grass beneath your feet is cooling. You can hear birds in the sky singing to you as you stroll. As you walk, bees are flying amongst the wildflowers of the meadow. Notice that you are drawn to a space where you want to lie down on your back and look up to the sky, looking out of your eyes from within your body. And as you find that space, just lie back and relax. And as you look up into the sky, watching white, fluffy clouds against the blue, still with the sun on your face, notice how good it is to be you here right now. Take in a deep breath. Enjoy the moment. As your body relaxes into the ground. and know full well that you have all you need to lead the most extraordinary of lives. All you need to do is take in a deep breath and smile, and that feeling will come back to you whenever it's needed. Now, I'm going to count you back from 5 to 1. At 1, you'll feel wide awake, feeling better than ever, knowing full well the adventure is going to begin. 5 and 4 and 3, taking a deep breath. And 2, wiggle those fingers and those toes. And 1, open your eyes and come back to the room.
Wow.
How did that work?
Woohoo! I went to a hillside outside Boulder, or I guess inside Boulder, Colorado, where I lived for years by there. And I used to take the most amazing pictures of this grassed field with gold coming through at sunrise and sunset and the trees. And you're taking me through this and I'm experiencing it. And then you said something magical. Feel the grass and the ground barefoot. Because I was always going barefoot through there.
Oh, cool. How nice.
I was like, wow. Thank you so much, Chris. This has been such an honor, such a treat. Everybody, go on out there, get Wake Up. It is such a beautiful book. And you may just want to keep it with you because it just feels so good. Thank you so much.
I've loved it, Michael. You take care.
You too. For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get Wake Up, and begin living in the here and now today, and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!